All right, we are back in Intrepid Kerbinauts, and we are continuing our journey and story on how to solve the great mystery, the great question of why is Duna red. In our last episode, we went all the way to Elu after having discovered ice on Duna. We realized, well, I mean, it's different than red. It's white, so somehow it became red. Maybe therein lies the secret to the mystery. But that ice did not give us the answers. So where else was there ice in the solar system? Well, obviously the furthest planet from Kerbin, which was Elu. So we went to Elu with our Elu Explorer module and our IGAD, our Induced Gravity Anti-Atrophy device. I remembered it, yeah. And we found ice. We brought it back from Elu. But the mystery persists, and we still need to do further science on this ice that we brought back from Elu. And what better way to do science on the ice that we brought back from Elu than to go to previously unknown secret facilities on Kerbin? Did you know that there are unlockable launch areas on Kerbin? I learned this from watching a Matt Lown video, and so I decided to incorporate it shamelessly steal and incorporate it into my story. Matt Lown, if you ever see these videos, I'd like to think that mimicry is the greatest form of flattery. Because I'm going to do my own version of going and finding all of these secret facilities on Kerbin. Science style. Or not science style. Not like science mode. That's not what I mean. Story style, narrative style. Anyway, I realize in this file, this playthrough I do not have a orbital station around Kerbin. So to give myself a bit of a challenge, I wanted to put in a polar orbital station around Kerbin that will allow me to survey the planet and, quote, find these secret facilities. So what you see here is me setting about creating I just want to make an interesting orbital station with multiple modules and multiple parts. And so you see kind of a main core there on the bottom, and then on the top is like my science module. It's going to have two counterspinning centrifuges in which we can put the ice and study it. And then once we have studied the ice and know exactly what questions need answering, then we can take those samples and do further studies at these secret facilities on Kerbin. So that is the mission here. You'll notice a change in the textures. In between building this thing and doing the mission, I went and downloaded a bunch of mods. I finally modded my save file, and I love it. They're so cool. I think, oh man, I need to put a list in the description, but what I have in here is the where you can move inside. I can't think of the mod right off the top of my head, but you can move inside the specific. So when you go IVA, you can actually get out of your seat and move around. So that's super cool. And then a whole bunch of I have like better or restock, so it kind of reskins all the stock parts. And then the non-stock parts I added was a space station kit of parts, and I think it's a pretty popular mod. I'm sure if you've played Kerbal Space Station for any amount of time, you would recognize these parts, but I had never included them, and so here I am including them. Anyway, we are in the spaceplane hangar, and what we're going to do is we're going to build the sections of the polar space station that I want to make, and then we'll break it apart. And to give myself an added challenge, I want to do a different style launch. I ended up doing two of the same styles of launch, but in general, I wanted to do a different style of launch for each one of the parts of this space station. So you've got that centrifuge science module, you've got the main core, which is where we will dock our escape pods or our amazing race style science vessels to go find these special secret science facilities. And then you've got like a habitation module and then an observation module below that. So we have finished making them. We're just kind of turning them all into sub-assemblies and then doing some final touches on that main core. And then we run over to the vehicle assembly building, the VAB, and we set about making an unmanned launch vehicle for this main core. So this main core is intended to have this long arm with which we can dock kind of like escape style or escape pod style space planes. Not really escape pods, just multiple space planes that are going to come up to this facility once we've done the science that we want to do and answer the questions that we could answer from the Polar Space Station, like where are these facilities? We don't know where they are. Well, that's why we need this Polar Space Station. We need to put it up into orbit and find these secret facilities. And in the meantime, while we're looking for the secret facilities, we should be studying the ice that we gathered from Elu to see if there are any answers. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to take the ice up to the space station, build it, do science on the ice, and then send a bunch of space planes, multiple space planes with different partnerships and different groups and different scientists, and send them off from the Polar Space Station once they have found the location of the secret facilities, and send them one by one to go land at these secret facilities, deliver the ice and science and data, and see what new discoveries we can make in the never-ending quest to answer the great existential question: why is Duna red? But here we are, a massive launch vehicle. I think a difference that you see here after I tested this a couple times is I added these big old space plane tail fins on the bottom of the rocket just to keep it a little bit more stable, because this thing did want to flip over, but I think it's a pretty looking vehicle. I think it's somewhat proportional and easy to look at. And yeah, so we got to remember we are going to a polar orbit, and we need a rather large polar orbit where the KerbNet access or the KerbNet devices will actually be able to survey the planet. So I targeted a 200 kilometer circular polar orbit, and it's not exactly polar. I think once we kind of look at it, we're off the exact north vector, the exact zero vector. But you know what? It's close enough for government work, and so we're off. Yeah, just a normal gravity turn. You know, we very slowly just followed our prograde marker over to about 45 degrees and then continued to burn up to 200. It was a little inefficient, but you know what? We have a ton of delta V in this second stage, and because we had so much delta V, I didn't want to leave a whole bunch of space trash, so it works out. All of these things that we're breaking off, that top kind of service bay and the nose cone and just the extra mass that we don't need, you know, will fall back to Kerbin and get destroyed on the ground or in the atmosphere. I never really get to use this service bay module that came with the breaking ground, meant to like have Apollo style. But I thought it'd be cool to have that service bay hiding the solar panels for this launch vehicle. So yeah, I thought that was a fun little thing to do. And then yeah, so now we're just going to orient ourselves up so that we can get up to our apoaps at about 200 kilometers and circularize. So that's exactly what we're going to do. This one specifically isn't a crewed mission, and that'll get us in trouble later on. But yeah, I imagine, you know, Jebediah, Valentina, Bill, and Bob, you know, they're celebrities now at this point. They have gone to Duna. They have established colonies on Duna. They have gone to the furthest planet, because I don't have any other planets and mods or anything. They have gone to the furthest planet from Kerbal and returned with continued data to try and solve what every Kerbal wants to know. Why is Duna red? So, you know, they're taking a break. They're taking it easy. They are sitting at the mission control center and controlling this vessel from there. You know, I like to think that Jebediah is in charge of this unmanned, uncrewed mission, while Valentina watches over his shoulder, making sure he doesn't make any mistakes. So yeah, we have cruised up to, so we pushed our apoaps up a little bit higher because we weren't quite out of the atmosphere there. I can't quite remember why, but I think I needed to... I'm not sure. We were going to like fall back. I can't remember why I did that, but I pushed up my apoapsis up a little bit so that it would be easier to circularize for some reason that I cannot remember at this point. But then we went around to our periaps and circularized. Very basic, just getting into orbit. And now all I'm doing here is I am checking to make sure that I haven't wasted any monopropellant, I think. I wanted to make sure that there wasn't any monopropellant on the... I think I put some monopropellant on the service bay, but maybe not. And then I'm also checking the eccentricity because I wanted it to be a rather decently circular orbit, and 0.0015 is pretty circular to me. So we'll go ahead and undock the core space station and wiggle ourselves away from this main core. Which, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and speed up the footage for that because it took a little while to kind of like get it kicked out of the way. But eventually we are able to wiggle that second stage vehicle away from the station. And that second stage vehicle has a probe core somewhere on it, so we will be able to deorbit it. That was important to me. I didn't want to leave any space trash flying around, so that's what we're doing right now. We're leaving that polar station where it's at. It's in a nice, perfectly circular orbit, and then we're going to go ahead and push this guy retrograde and deorbit it. Now, when I built this thing, I did not intend to recover it. I was just going to fly it into the atmosphere and let it die a glorious death and enjoy its time in Valhalla. But something that intrigued me is as I started to watch this thing fall, I realized that we are on a very shallow, non-aggressive, very passive entry into the atmosphere, and it was proving to be rather resilient. So, you know, I was expecting it to kind of just explode here. I knew I was probably going to lose the solar panels, and that was fine, but nothing else exploded. And so I was like, okay, well, let's just go ahead and try and land this thing. So yeah, we do. Normally, I just kind of like to watch the fireworks go off, which is why we're bothering with this thing. But you know, being the efficient and responsible project manager, I don't know, that Jebediah is, he says, no, we're going to recover every piece of rocketry and, you know, equipment or whatever. I'm at a loss for words. My eloquence escapes me at this point. Jebediah is trying to land it and trying to save it. Save the space program some money, and who knows, maybe its impact into the surface will reveal something about it and the surface itself, and I don't know. But look how much prettier the volumetric clouds look. I don't actually have BlackRack's volumetric clouds. I just haven't purchased it yet, so these are just the Eve volumetric clouds, but I do intend doing that later. Okay, so that was launch one of our multiple launch polar station build. So launch two, so I wanted to do a different style, so we're going to do a SSTO. We're going to do a single stage to orbit spaceplane style launch. I had to pick one of the modules that could fit in the Mark III hangar bay or cargo bay. So yeah, and we had a little docking node there, which that was a bit of a mistake, and you'll also see that later. I'll point out when we get to it. But yeah, the intention is to quote dock this second module. I think for like real terms, you could just clamp it into the bay, right? You wouldn't need a docking port. It's not like we need to transfer humans across an airtight, or humans. Whoa, what am I saying? It's not like we need to transfer Kerbals across an airtight docking node there, but it's just a way to connect and easily detach without worrying about detachment, like hydraulic detachers or separators that then might leave some space trash if I don't orient them correctly or whatever. I just find the docking node easier to use. There we go. So, quote, docked it to the inside of the hangar, and then build out the rest of the plane. The way I like to build wings, I like to do a very simple kind of graduated, use the big delta wing, and then slowly increase the angle as you get closer and closer to the fuselage, so it's one nice sweeping wing. I have tried building, with the blocks and the slants and building at the wing, and you kind of see that close to the fuselage, but I just like the way those big delta wings look. It looks very much like a space shuttle, which was the intention, and I just love using them. So this design, with the 4 Rapier engines at the back and the 2 nuclear engines, did not work. You'll see soon enough on the runway. I had to adjust how the engines were oriented around the fuselage. They were pushing not along the center of gravity and causing all sorts of weird rotations and torque. And so I ended up doing a bunch, and I wasn't getting the thrust that I needed, so because this was a pretty heavy payload. So I ended up doing a bunch more Rapier engines around the edges of the fuselage, and then I shouldn't have done this because it was miserably slow, but one single nuclear engine angled slightly down and through the kind of like how whatever the real world equivalent of the vector engines are for the space shuttle, how they're actually angled through the center of gravity of the combined system. If you look at a real space shuttle, those vector engines are angled kind of through the belly of the actual orbiter. Same thing with this nuclear engine. It's pointed slightly down and through what would be the center of gravity as this thing gets into orbit. But that is neither here nor there. We have Gracott and Phowin Kerbin. Gracott, she's an experienced pilot. She's been on a few missions with the celebrities themselves. She was on a mission with Jebediah and Valentina. So she's a pretty big deal when it comes to the Kerbal space program. And Phowin, of course, we always take an intern, or we take as many interns as we can. And so Phowin is learning. This is a learning mission for her. She is shadowing and learning from Gracott, and they are off. They did their they did their pre-flight checks, and they are off. And one important thing we have to remember is this is a polar station. And so we had to make sure that the station the station was flying overhead nearby, and 2, that we align our trajectory relatively close to the station's trajectory, because SSTOs famously, especially when the whole thing is not filled with fuel, we have a payload. You have to be a little bit more efficient with your flight plan and flight trajectory. And so we turned as kind of efficiently, we turned as well as we could, trying not to allow my surface speed to get too high, because this thing is pretty flip heavy. It's just very bulky, and the center of gravity is wobbly, and the center of lift is way behind the center of gravity, because once that payload is gone, the center of gravity moves. And I wanted to make sure it had stable flight on the way back, blah, 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 all this stuff. But anyway, Gracott checking in with Phowin. How you doing? Or Gracott.
How you doing, Phowin?
Phowin says,
Yeah, we're doing good. Doing good.
Gracott looks back down at that surface speed and says, okay, we are ready to go for orbit. So they are lined up, and Gracott says,
all right, let's go for orbit.
So Gracott allows the plane just to stay right there in that prograde vector, so that once we get above 300, 400 meters per second, that's when those Rapier engines really start to produce more and more thrust. And then once we get up to high enough in the atmosphere where, so you right click your Rapier engine and watch the thrust, and as soon as the thrust starts to go down to something that is negligible, then switch it. I have an action group set and switch it over to the closed mode, the non-air breathing mode. And then we have in the top right our resources. We're just going to watch the oxidizer drain as we stay as close to the prograde marker as we can. I could probably be flying a little bit flatter here, but I mean, not flatter. I could probably have been a little bit more aggressive on my ascent here. But you know what? That's okay. We should have probably been trying to get higher into the atmosphere quicker so that it's thinner and we are experiencing less drag. But you know what? It is what it is. Once we're up into out of the atmosphere and up into the vacuum of space, that nuclear engine is super, super, super efficient, and we'll have, what, 1,500 meters per second or so of... Is that what that says? 1,500 or 1,900? I can't see. It's a tiny screen in the editor. But more than 1,000 meters per second is well more than what we need. So, you know, Gracott is telling Phowin, you're not going to be perfect every time. Or, yeah.
Phowin, you're not going to be perfect every time, but we are definitely close enough.
And as we say in Kerbal Space, here at this Kerbal Space Agency, close enough is good enough. That's what they say. I'm going to make a poster for that. Anyway, Phowin just nods in agreement. And they continue on their quest to orbit. So, yeah, we're just floating up. I realize that my apoapsis, so I am way ahead of the orbital station. So I'm going to go ahead and Phowin is going to go ahead and push their apoaps up higher to be at least in line, you know, up to 200 or so kilometers. We were going to wait and then burn prograde at apoaps, but might as well just get our apoaps up to the target apoaps, which was about 204 kilometers. And then, since we are ahead, we're gonna float to apoaps and get into a larger orbit to allow the space station to catch up to us. So we'll go ahead and here in a moment. We're just checking the ascending node, so to see how far off angle-wise our orbit is, and it's not bad. It's 4.5 degrees or so. So let's go ahead and check and make sure the payload is doing okay. Gracott telling Phowin, you know, it's important that even after getting into orbit, hold on.
It's important, Phowin, that even after getting into orbit,
you know, Gracott takes this very seriously, right? She's vying for that captain seat in the next mission with Jebediah and Valentina. But Gracott tells Phowin,
all right, you ready for your first spacewalk? Go ahead and get ready, and do not evacuate the cockpit because I don't have my helmet on. Phowin.
Oh, you know what? It's a good thing. Kerbals are immortal and can really only pass in fiery, disastrous wrecks. Anyway, Phowin, successfully going on EVA, is doing a visual inspection of the payload. Everything looks great. She doesn't know it now, but she notices that there's something off about that docking node holding the payload to the orbiter. And she thinks about it. She starts to radio in,
Gracott.
And there's the long pause. And then Phowin comes inside.
Never mind. Everything looks good.
You know how young interns, they don't want to ruffle any feathers. So she decides not to, it's probably nothing, decides not to report the anomalous findings she had on the docking port. Anyway, we need to clean up our orbit here so that we can get into a nice intersect, a nice rendezvous with the orbital station. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and burn anti-normal, anti-normal? Yeah, whatever. We're burning in one direction or the other. Normal to our... I could have been more efficient by waiting for the ascending node and descending node, but I mean, it was so close that I just, but you know, getting up to apoaps and doing it was perfectly fine. And see, yeah, look, now the nodes are at, 0.5, 0.3. So playing with some maneuver nodes. All I know is I just need to make my orbit bigger than the space station orbits, or the space station's orbit, so that it can catch up. So that's what we do. We're going to burn prograde. Gracott kind of trying to show off for the intern here. Doesn't check her math. And, is talking. She's talking about the snacks, talking about what they're going to do when they get back to the ground, and way overshoots how big that. And I think it's because I was definitely just looking for those close approach nodes to show up. And I thought, well, surely they'll just show up as I start to make my orbit bigger. And I way overshot it. So now we got to go to apoapse and slow down relative because it's caught up too much. It was a whole big thing, but a great learning experience for Phowin. And, that's all that's important. So anyway, we are coming back around to now our periapse, which was our apoapse. It's now our periapse. And we're going to slow down and bring our apoapse in and make our orbit smaller because now we are way behind the orbital space station. Rendezvous is not easy, but in general, yes, if you are behind the space station, you want to speed up relative to the space station or to your target. And if you are in front, you want to slow down relative to your target. And smaller circles are faster, bigger circles are slower. So we are speeding up relative to our target and just bringing in those close approach indicators as close as possible. I usually target 1 kilometer, somewhere around 1 kilometer. And a little pro trick, you can use your scroll wheel to fine tune. You don't have to click and pull on those directional nodes. You can hover over prograde, retrograde, blah, 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 and scroll over them, and they'll click them one at a time. Kind of like using the little tool down in the left hand corner. Anyway, we are doing that. We were doing that last little adjustment to get our separation distance down to about, 1 kilometer. And once we get close on the maneuver indicator by our nav ball, I just go ahead and remove the maneuver node and kind of do it by hand and just watch the separation indicator go down, to an appropriate number. But we've done that, and oh man, look at the visual mods are so pretty. But yeah, now all we have to do is go around one more time, catch up to the polar space station. What did we name? It's Goose something, right? It's because the name of this orbiter is Goose Feather, so I think it's the Polar Goose. Like the Polar Express. It's the Polar Goose. That's the name of the space station. That is what I'm henceforth calling it, because I think that's what we named it. And this orbiter, this SSTO, is called the Goose Feather, because it's somewhat related to the Polar Goose. Anyway, that's neither here or there. As we rendezvous, so this is important. You want to slow down relative to your target or speed up relative to target. You want to bring your velocity relative to your target to 0. But something you can do while you're doing that, as you get to your close approach, is try and keep your directional vectors pointed at your target vectors. So the pink vectors on your nav ball are your target vectors, and then you've got your directional vectors. You got prograde and retrograde. And if you think about it, if your prograde vector is pointed at your target vector, then that means you are going towards your target. So I've said this, I think I've mentioned this before, but you can move your retrograde and prograde indicators closer to the target by burning near your prograde and retrograde vectors. If you burn near your retrograde vector, it will move away from your directional vector. Man, that's a lot of words, vectors. Basically, if you burn to the side of your retrograde, it'll move away from you on your nav ball, and if you burn to the side of your prograde, it will move towards you on your nav ball. So I use this is important. Here's the anomaly. I can't undock because I didn't put a second docking node. I didn't put a docking node that was connected to the orbiter. I just put one docking node and attached it to the orbiter, kind of using like a radial attachment. And I think this is just design-wise, it wouldn't have mattered, right? This would have been clamped. I'm trying to stage things. I'm trying to figure out why it's not working. In the real world, it would have just been clamped into the hangar. So I have no problem doing what you're about to see me do, which was there, boom, that quick load. I went back to the VAB. I added another docking node that it was, quote, docked to, and then just used the cheat menu to put myself back in the exact orbit that I was in with the exact amount of fuel and everything. So it's like nothing changed. We had our 1 kilometer separation, and there it is. Just forget that we ever had that design issue. Gracott and Phowin, they just had this weird space-time continuum experience break in the space-time continuum. Gracott looks over at Phowin and goes, "What was that?" Or,
"What was that?"
Phowin,
"Nothing. I'm sure it's fine. It didn't have anything to do with the docking port, did it?" "No. You know, as an intern, it's okay to make mistakes." "Okay."
Anyway, we decided the easiest thing to do would be to just bring the orbiter over to the space station, dock it with the orbiter, because that module has no way to control it. It does not have a probe core and it does not have a control room. So, yeah. So we just docked the this orbiter with the space station, and then Gracott, making the same mistake Phowin just did, goes on EVA and is going to float herself over to the now docked space station and move it away from the orbiter and get everything nice and aligned. Something I did not know is that you can just right click on those docking nodes and change the alignment angle. I did not know that. So this is an important part of the mission that Gracott didn't have to do, but yeah, just taking a look around the what is sure to be the home for a bunch of scientists in a short while, and making sure everything looks good. This is that mod I was talking about where you can just move around inside IVA or whatever it's called. Gracott buckles herself in. She is now in the cupola module, able to control the station. So we're going to push the station away from the orbiter, give a nice, safe, appropriate separation from the orbiter. And then we are going to do something that is totally unnecessary, because I did not know you could just change the alignment angle straight from the docking node, which makes total sense. And I don't know if that's something that was added in a DLC or if that's always been there. I have no idea. But we will undock the habitation module, turn the station relative to the habitation module, and then redock. So while that's going on, what's some trivia? You know, I love Kerbal Space Program. I did mechanical engineering as my undergrad, and I fell in love with Kerbal Space Program. I used this game to kill some time between classes. I would literally go to campus, maybe I had a class at 8 a.m. and then not another one until 11 a.m. or 1 p.m. or something. I would just go to the library and play Kerbal Space Program on my laptop. Sometimes I even played in class when I didn't want to pay attention but wanted to make it look like I was taking notes. I was a bad student. But I taught myself a lot about orbital mechanics and, well, not real orbital mechanics. I taught myself a lot about... No, I take that back. I did teach myself about real orbital mechanics and how delta V calculations work and all of that before all these cool tools were there. And learned to play the game the hard way. But yeah, that was me discovering that you can just right-click on that docking node and change the alignment angle. So anyway, Gracott makes her way. I was going to do like a little tour of the station, but I very quickly got disoriented and confused as to what door went where. And I figured we could do that later. And something that started to happen when I went, into this little mod is that the space station started turning uncontrollably when Gracott started to move around. And I thought, that's interesting. So I load to see if it's just like a weird glitch. And it kept happening. So I was like, you know what? The space station tour, there's that quick load. The space station tour is gonna have to wait. Because as soon as I unbuckle, the space station just starts moving again. You see how it starts, well, actually, see, maybe I'm finding out that, oh, that fixed it. Anyway, we're not going to do a tour. We are going to leave the station where it is. It's going to be an empty husk. It is nice and prepared. We left the heaters on so that it's nice and warm for when the science teams arrive. But Phowin holding down the fort. Gracott gets back in her seat. Phowin and Gracott, they do their pre-flight return to planet checklists, which was, are all snacks aboard eaten? Yes. Is the cargo bay closed? Yes. Do our fins and control surfaces work? Yes. Are you ready? I don't know. I ran out of ideas. We're ready. We're ready to return it to the Kerbal Space Center, or get as close as we possibly can. So we're just checking to make sure that we're not going to accidentally burn. I wanted to keep a little bit of fuel in those Rapier engines. Oh, excuse me. That was gross. I'm going to cut that one out. I wanted to keep a little bit of fuel in our Rapier, or able to be used in our Rapier engines, because I knew that I probably wouldn't get close to the Kerbal Space Station. So we'll find out. We'll find out how close we get. But we'll time warp around and see if we're relatively lined up, and then about a quarter of the way from the Space Center, which we should have done more like halfway around the globe at this distance. I'm used to coming in from 100 kilometers, not 200 kilometers, so I way overshot the KSC. But that's okay. We are making our retrograde burn right about now? Yes, there we go. Making our retrograde burn now. Phowin checking in with, or Gracott checking in with Phowin.
All right, Phowin. This is the moment. This is the most dangerous part of the journey. Go ahead and say hi to the polar goose as we go by, because the goose feather is about to try not to burn up in the atmosphere. Got it?
Phowin responds in kind.
Got it, Gracott. I am so excited to be doing my very first orbital mission with you in a state-of-the-art space plane such as the Goose Feather.
And look how excited they are. They are so excited. Look at that bottom right corner. They are pumped. They're pumped. And full disclosure, it took me 6 tries to get this right. And I'm so glad I kept a little bit of fuel. I basically changed the fuel priority flow so that it wouldn't matter, actually. I think I just kept an eye on my fuel reserves and kept about 200 meters per second or so of fuel, because I knew that once we were in air breathing mode, that would go a very long way. So what does that say, 700? Okay, so I saved about 700 meters per second of fuel. And then, I'll shut down that nuclear engine at some point, and once we're in air breathing mode, that'll go a very long way for the Rapier engines. But the astute observer might notice some of those quick loads. This is my 6th attempt. You know what? I was pretty proud that I at least did it and had this thing glide as close. We'll see. We'll find. This we're talking about, like. Anyway, we'll see. I want to keep the mystery. I want to keep the mystery alive. But I way overshot it. There's no question that Gracott, not me, Gracott. It's not Jebediah. It's not Valentina. If it were Jebediah or Valentina, they would have made it to the Space Center no problem. But Gracott, she's not as experienced. She's still learning. Totally competent. I mean, they wouldn't have put her in charge of the mission if she wasn't competent. Still overshot the Kerbal Space Program Center, Kerbal Space Center. And I was trying all sorts of strategies to not overshoot, like wobbling and trying to just go flat pancake into the atmosphere. A couple of times that I did that, we just immediately lost our wings and our fuselage, and crashed into the ground in a fiery, terrible accident. So those simulations obviously didn't work. And normally I like to play this game where I go, okay, I'm simulating, and then now it's for real. I didn't do that with this because, you know what? I just didn't want to. And my fun isn't wrong. And that's not part of the challenge. The part of the challenge is to put a polar space station in a nice polar orbit using multiple different types of launch methods. So I just wanted to have a successful landing of the SSTO. So now that we're slow enough to use our control surfaces without breaking up due to aerodynamic forces, we are going to turn ourselves back around and make our way back to the Kerbal Space Center, and we'll see how close we get. So now that we're lower in the atmosphere, look, that 700 meters per second is very quickly going up, and now it's 2,000, 2,200, 2,100. So we have a ton of delta V and plenty to get ourselves kind of pointed back at the KSC. So yeah, we just kind of go suborbital again and point ourselves up and over back at the KSC. Anytime that you get to actually, I feel like, fly around on Kerbin, it's a benefit because you don't spend a lot of time on Kerbin. That's part of the reason why I wanted to do this mission with these secret facilities, is because most of the time you just fly straight away from Kerbin, but Kerbin's a beautiful planet. So we're using up the rest of our fuel reserves with the Rapier engines here in air breathing mode, and I feel like we went a little bit too high. We probably could have stayed lower and gotten a little bit more out of those Rapier engines, but you know what? It's all right. We're gonna get close. Okay, on the right hand side of the screen you see like one bay, very close right, and then you see an island, and then another bay, and then you see a third bay. The fourth big bay, barely there on the horizon. That's where we're headed. You want to, if you're coming from this direction, aim for that island, because that's where the island airfield is, and kind of point yourself somewhere between the island and the land sticking out, the peninsula and the bay and the cove, and you'll start to get yourself lined up. So that's what we're doing. We'll just float our way on over. Had a little bit of fuel left apparently, but yeah, we are now 100% out of fuel, and we are a big falling rock with wings. But surprisingly, if you keep your airspeed up with this specific design that I have here, it flies quite nicely. But I knew I needed to keep my airspeed up. So one thing to remember about trying to land, right? Get your prograde vector aligned with your target. So, and a good thing to remember is the airstrip is perfectly on the east-west line. So if you're going west, get your prograde marker lined up directly on the 270, or if you're going east, on the 90. That will help a lot. So we did a pretty good job here. We waited until the very, very last moment to put our landing gear down, and then I thought, oh, maybe we could deploy our things as flaps, but didn't really help. We slammed into the runway again. Gracott, she's still learning. But those landing gear handled it just fine, and as all things considered, very successful. What do you think? And Gracott turns to Phowin.
So, what do you think?
Phowin says,
That was amazing. I love it. It was amazing. I learned so much from you.
Gracott says,
Good. Glad you enjoyed it. Let's do it again.
all right. Well, that's it. That's all I got. That's part one. This is a multiple launch polar space station, the Polar Goose. And the first one was obviously just a conventional rocket. The second one, an SSTO. We'll see what part two of the Polar Goose build has in store. Thanks for watching, everybody.